Welcome back, everyone. I hope you had a really nice, refreshing break and some valuable conversations. I'm Yasmin Esman, Senior Price Reporter here at Fastmarkets, and I'll be your host at this final stretch of today's main stage program. We are now moving west to Nevada and Texas to hear how these states are positioning themselves at the forefront of domestic lithium innovation. Our first panel is Nevada. Nevada is quickly emerging as a hub for lithium development, integrating mining, production, and recycling to form a seamless loop. Well, let's welcome our moderator, Howard Klein, partner at RK Equity, and our panel of leaders shaping the future of Nevada's battery ecosystem. Melanie Sheldon, Senior Director of Business Development at Nevada Governor's Office. John Evans, President and CEO of Lithium Americas. Ryan Melzard, CEO of American Battery Technology Company. And James Calloway, Executive Chairman of Ioneer. Let's dive in.
Welcome. I'm Howard Klein at RK Equity and Rockstock Channel. If you've ever watched a podcast on the lithium battery materials, I'd encourage you to look at that. I want to remind everybody, if you want to ask questions, I have a couple of questions, but we would very much welcome yours to go on the slido.com and enter your question there, and we'll ask those toward the end, or if you just want to raise your hand also, you can do that. I got my start in lithium about 15 years ago in Nevada, and with Lithium Americas, the Thacker Pass project, which we're going to talk about, was one that, that's how I learned about this business. But we're going to start with Melanie, who is in the business development in the governor's office, to kind of just talk about Nevada. Nevada is much more than just lithium. Obviously, Tesla has a gigafactory here, but we talk about a closed-loop supply chain. For America, a closed-loop supply chain is actually being built, here just in Nevada. So if you could just talk about what you're doing, and Nevada, as a great destination across the supply chain, and then we'll go into each of these, lithium development projects.
Great. Thank you, Howard. Appreciate it. Melanie Sheldon, Senior Director of Business Development for the Nevada Governor's Office of Economic Development. Our agency actually has significant function, but specifically to me, I facilitate companies' entry into the Nevada market or their growth once they're here. And just by the nature of Nevada happening to have one of the largest lithium deposits in the US, or the largest, I'm sorry if I had that wrong, but just because of the nature of our rich mining in history, our access to these resources, I have had some great exposure to companies within the lithium space, and Nevada is currently the only state that is active in all 7 sections of that lithium loop, and that's everything from mining and extraction to the end product and then recycling again. I think it all started with geology. Tesla probably came along and kicked things off with their gigafactory. That was very catalytic for other companies such as Panasonic moving in, and then Redwood Materials, the company that were credited with closing that loop in 2022. But obviously we have wonderful companies doing everything in between, and as you will hear from my counterparts on this stage today.
Great, and thank you. I'm going to give each of the other 3 panelists just an opportunity to kind of introduce themselves in 1 to 2 minutes in terms of who they are and their project. So, John?
Hi, I'm John Evans. I'm the CEO and President of Lithium Americas. We're in construction now of the Thacker Pass integrated lithium project in northern Nevada. It's north of Winnemucca and Humboldt County. It's the joint venture with General Motors. We started construction a little over a year ago. We're fully ramped up. We made a final investment decision with General Motors April 1st, and we're on track now. You can see pictures on our website. We're pouring concrete, and first steel goes up in August. So the mechanical completion and plant startup will be late 2027, and it'll be ramping up in 2028 throughout the whole calendar year.
James?
I'm James Calloway. I'm the executive chairman of Ioneer, and we're developing, have been developing for the last 7.5 years, Rhyolite Ridge in the center between Reno and Las Vegas. It's a large-scale lithium production and lithium carbonate factory that we're building. We are at the very terminal phase where we're getting ready to start building this thing. Last thing we have left to do now is to finish up the equity funding for our partners process, which is beginning now this week. We have a $1 billion loan from the DOE closed like John does, and have a fantastic project that produces both high amounts of lithium, but also large amounts of boric acid with the same process. And that's very important for us because it brings down our cost of production of lithium to a significant event, makes us into low-cost producers in the world because of that credit. So we'll talk more about that later. Thank you.
And Ryan?
Thank you. Ryan Melsert here, CEO of American Battery Technology Company. Moved to Nevada about 10 years ago as part of the initial design team for the first Tesla battery gigafactory up near Reno. Group was left about 5 years ago. We formed ABTC specifically to design and construct our battery recycling system, which we've now built outside of Reno, which makes a domestic lithium hydroxide product. And we also have our own mine and design in Central Nevada near the town of Tonopah, where we have our own process to make a lithium hydroxide from a claystone resource. So we're excited to have won a handful of awards and grants to develop that project. We have a functioning integrated demonstration facility now, and are moving forward with our commercial scale facility construction.
Okay, great. So John, Lithium Americas, as I describe it, is now in construction, made a final investment decision April 1st. Congratulations after getting a final piece from Orion to match GM and the Department of Energy's Loan Programs Office. But people talk about how long it takes to kind of build a project. Like Chevron, which just announced that they're entering, Arkansas, was the originator of the project, I think, at Thacker Pass. Like it was, exploration that they had done, I don't know, in the 70s or 80s. But the project in earnest, I guess, began in 2008 or 9. So we're now like kind of...
7, actually.
Okay, yeah. So we're already in year 18, and it'll be another 2 years or so until it's kind of in production. And you entered it, you have a history in Argentine brines, at FMC, which ultimately became Arcadium, and Rio Tinto bought that. But if you could just talk about, the journey since you joined Lithium Americas, like up to this point, because it did, under the Trump administration, you got permitted. Under Biden, you got largely financed. Now we're in the Trump administration. Just like, talk a little bit about how you got here last few years and what's in store in the next couple.
Yes, this is a really tough industry to be in. It's periods of euphoria followed by periods of pain and suffering, which we're in now. It's analogous to oil and gas in some cases. It's a small industry. When I left the industry the first time in the end of 2012, it was about 130,000 tons, and here we are at about 1.5 million tons. It's difficult in that the industry's become much bigger, so it's not 3 folks that I was part of that oligopoly back 15 years ago. No one controls the industry in terms of lithium suppliers. Actually, who controls it now are the battery guys. Actually, it's CATL and BYD for the most part, because they're the largest users. There's a lot of investment going on in the US and Canada. We were chatting beforehand. I counted up about over 400 gigawatt hours for North America. That's 300,000 tons of refined material. You can add all of our projects up here, and that's a drop in the bucket. The difficult part, beyond the finding the asset, developing the asset, a flow sheet, permitting, all of the other stuff that always constantly even has issues after you get done, is financing. Because this industry is young and immature. What you're seeing in rare earths now, lithium had that about 2 or 3 years ago. It'll be hot for 2 years, and then it'll go through a period of great decline. It takes a while to put all this together and get financed, and when you rush and do that, once you get done with all that stuff and you're ready maybe to finance, you're in a down cycle, and everybody loses interest. I mean, if I put rare earths or AI in my name, or Lithium America's name, maybe we'd attract more capital, but For now, it's out of cycle, and you get into 2022 and you see what happened. Albemarle is a great story, and I have a lot of respect for them. In 2019, we all want to be valued as chemical companies. I come from the chemical industry. I'm not a mining person, actually. You have a higher valuation, but with that, what is expected is steady cash flows and in a lot of cases, dividends. So Albemarle ran into problems. I remember you and I actually were at a conference in DB in about 2018 or 19. And there was a lot of pressure. They had negative cash flow projected. Analysts were after them. I was talking to some of their analysts. So they slashed their capital. This was before COVID. If they had built through the cycle, they probably would have been coming online around 2022 and would have been printing money. But part of the story of that is that you have to build through the cycle. Mining companies can do that. They have big balance sheets, plus their investors expect them to take big risks, but they also trade at a lower multiple. Chemical companies don't have that, and today, you don't have anyone who's really big in this industry. Albemarle had a market cap of, I don't know, 40 billion? It's like 8 today. The rest of us here, if you add it all up, I don't even think we come up to $1 billion. We peaked when we were together at LAC at 4 billion, 4.5, and our market cap's about 600. So the tools for you to go out and do things become much more difficult, and it just takes time, and we'll have another cycle again. It won't bounce to 40 or 80, but it'll go up, I don't know, 30 or 40,000. There'll be a supply response, but until the market has pricing that is acceptable so that to have a decent IRR, which I'm in the same camp as Dale, as Albemarle, about $20,000 a ton, you're going to have these fits and spurts just like you see in rare earths today. I always use rare earths because rare earths 2010 to 13 was great. Mushroom companies popped up all doing kinds of stuff. The market was flooded with rare earth oxides and magnets. Everybody got great. And I mean, I have a huge amount of respect for Jim Letitzky at MP, and he's a friend. That business came about because Molycorp went bankrupt. And you're seeing the same things right now in lithium, and then this will come back again. Because here it's batteries. We don't have arcane applications. This whole meeting is even necessitated by batteries. Cars, data centers, phones. The growth in batteries is going to be 3.5 times from a terawatt hours over the next 5 years. That requires about 2.5 times more lithium than we make today, and I don't see how we get there. So I don't know if that answers your question.
It's a lot of good color on why the demand for lithium is attractive, but the cyclic nature of it. And, you know, Rio Tinto made a contrarian bet, and you've talked a lot about Albemarle. And there's a lot of oil companies at this conference. I contend that if they were, you know, Rio Tinto has a CapEx budget of, I don't know, 11 or 12 billion dollars, right? And they bought Arcadium for $6 or $7 billion. You could buy Albemarle for a little bit north of that, and they actually have a catalyst business for the oil business. If Exxon, you know, which has a $25 billion CapEx budget, is very serious about lithium, like why wouldn't they acquire or make a counter-cyclical bid, or Chevron, or Oxy, or Coke? Anyway, that's just an aside. GM and Ford and some of your partners, James, are making bets on sediment, again, as is the U.S. government through the Loan Programs Office. So there's very few people in the junior mining, lithium mining industry that have actually done this before. And you are one, James, having founded Orocobre and put a very large mine in Argentina into production. So why don't you just talk about your journey? Why did you pivot to the U.S. and sediments? And I know it's hard rock, it's not as much of clay, and it has boric acid, et cetera. But if you just talk about your journey, which started in 2016 to now, right? And what's in store, you know, in the next kind of couple of months and year as you get fully financed with your equity partner.
Sure, thank you. You might ask me what psychiatrist I need to go see to do this twice. I mean, you do it one time, you're excused for just not understanding how hard it is. And I was thinking, John, about what you just said. I think that if there was anything I would say to people that are in this business is it's a hard business. It requires a credible determination and persistence against all the odds. And you have to really focus on the details. The devil's in the detail in this business. I've been lucky enough that I had one of those projects at Al Ras become a very important piece of production, but it was 8 years of slugging it out with crazy governments in Argentina, 14,000 feet where you could barely walk and breathe, engineering challenges, et cetera. And so I guess I got convinced, Howard, that all that experience would have some application going forward. And I was fortunate enough that I was introduced to this project at Rhyolite Ridge at its very inception. And the thing that struck me is I was prejudiced against lithium projects in Nevada because I was skeptical about the challenges associated with producing lithium economically from clays. And so I came in with that bias. And by the way, John and his team and all the others that have been working on this have shown that I shouldn't have been quite so concerned about it. I mean, they've done a great job of figuring that out. But what caught my attention with Rhyolite Ridge is we have this fantastic and unique mineralogy. It's a borosilicate material, and it is not clay. So our project, different than all the rest in Nevada, is not a clay project. We have lithium clay, but we're going to be producing for many years from a borosilicate that when we leach it in acid like we do with clays, fortunately, out comes both boric acid, a lot of it, as well as lithium. But the rock that we leach doesn't come into, most of it stays hard and competent, and we can we just drain it, and then we don't have to have any really separation activities before we start processing. So it's a unique mineralogy. The only thing similar is what Jadar over in Serbia, but it is different in the sense that we're an open pit mine versus underground mines. So that's what got me interested, Howard, when I realized that was the case, because otherwise I wouldn't have done it at the time because I didn't need to do it. But I've been so lucky to get to work on this project because, really good projects like, what John has and what Rhyolite Ridge is, really great projects have the tendency to surprise you to the upside. They keep getting better. The more you know about them, they do better than you think. And I think certainly in the case of Orocobre's Alaraz, that's turned into a fantastic piece of production. Always got better and better. Same thing here. Now look, John, I agree with you that this is you have to have a counter-cyclical mind to say you're going to go build a $2 billion facility anywhere in the United States or anywhere else. But I do think that being in Nevada and in the United States, finding large-scale, long-duration projects at the bottom part of the cost curve are very, very rare indeed. And I do think that for that reason, and only for that reason, that a highly developed project with a permit, with $1 billion of government money, it will get funded and will get built. And we think that we'll be breaking ground, doing FID and moving forward by the end of this year. Everything's done. We're ready to build. We're at 70% engineering complete. We've spent $220 million so far developing this project. So this isn't some pipe dream out of my head. This is 8 years of a fantastic team working tirelessly to get ready, just like we did at Alaraz. So, that's my experience, Howard.
That's great. Ryan, we're going to talk about your project. So these guys have been doing it for, 17 and 9 years. You're maybe going to take advantage of a third mover advantage, perhaps, but you have both a lithium clay project, I think similar to Thacker Pass, but you also have the recycling. Do you view yourself more, is recycling ahead of the lithium, or are they both being pursued simultaneously? How would you view, for investors looking at the company, like what is the priority, or are they both equal?
Yeah, the way we see it is the industry really can't exist without both. As we have scrap material and end-of-life material reach the end of the market, there has to be an avenue for those elements to be recovered and sold back into the market. And if the amount of batteries in the field was fixed, that could provide just about all the material needed. But it's nowhere near fixed. The amount of batteries is growing very quickly. So our recycling project, we work to close that loop, and then our primary lithium project is meant to fill that loop the first time. So just the fact that you can't really exist without both, and the technologies end up having a lot of similarities in the unit operations. The same ways we separate lithium, purify it, convert it, crystallize it. A lot of the technologies are direct overlaps in our lithium from our claystone resource compared to our lithium from our recycling resource. And as you mentioned, these mining projects can take an extremely large amount of time to bring to market. So dollars spent or borrowed early on can take a very long time to get their return. Whereas the recycling market is kind of the reverse. So we built our first commercial recycling plant about 2 years ago. We've had that running ever since. We're selling large amounts of material, thousands of tons per year of products into the market, and generating revenue for the business. That covers a lot of the operational costs, the development, the permitting for the primary lithium side through the recycling unit. So they both make products that are complementary, that are made to the same spec to be sold to the same customers. But on a cash flow basis, they really do help to complement each other. And then the type of claystone resource we have down near Tonopah is, I think people like to group claystones and sedimentary resources together. There are quite a few differences once you start refining the process. So because nobody had ever really developed a process to recover lithium from this specific claystone, we won an award from the Department of Energy about 3 years ago to build an integrated demonstration facility. So a whole unit we built up near Reno that can process a few hundred tons so far of feed material, go through each of the steps. We actually make a battery-grade lithium hydroxide product out the back end. And having that run continuously allows us to optimize the operating conditions, inform our studies, lets our investors actually come and see and touch a unit. Same with the construction company that we work with to build the commercial scale refinery. So it's much more than a lab scale project or a PowerPoint presentation, actually having that functioning demonstration facility. And that's a big part of why we were able to win a follow-on grant for the Department of Energy to build about the first $50 million worth of the commercial plant. And now just the past few months, we've been working with the EXIM Bank and have a letter of interest for $900 million of funding to help fund further expansion of the lithium refinery. So we definitely see it as a tiered scale-up of a new technology, going from laboratory scale a few years ago, our integrated demonstration plant, and now into our commercial facility. But like you mentioned, having the recycling system and that business unit definitely helps on a cash flow basis and cost of capital, not having to carry those initial dollars through the 17 years to production.
Okay, great. You have BASF as a partner in the recycling, is that correct?
We do. We signed a strategic partnership agreement about 2 years ago. Again, from the recycling side, large amounts of waste coming back from the market. They're really the only company right now that has a functioning cathode manufacturing plant within the US. They have a cathode plant in Michigan that's been running for quite a while. It purchases battery-grade metals that are made from recycling facilities just as ours. And within the US and beyond, they're one of the largest consumers of battery-grade metals. A lot of the transition metals we make from our recycling plant, but also the lithium products.
Okay, great. And Melanie, I want to switch to, I guess, politics a little bit, both local Nevada politics and everyone here has experienced some. You talk about Argentina, James, having some crazy politics. Prepared you for some of the politics we have in the U.S. because both of these gentlemen at LAC and Ioneer have permitting questions that they've overcome. But if you could just talk about the Nevada, what is Nevada doing to support all of these types of projects and why it's a great place kind of within the United States, given the experience that these two projects have had?
Well, thank you, Howard. And that is predominantly, once again, not just my job, but our agency's job, is how do we make you successful when you come into our market? What does that look like? Do we remove barriers? Do we deploy workforce training? We have an area that sits in our office that actually works with industry and with higher learning to develop curriculums. So we will then fund that so that companies coming in can build pipelines, and we've done a lot of work in the lithium space. Everything from Western Nevada College has a battery recycling and advanced manufacturing. We have instrumentation, diesel tech and mining. There's a lot going on, and that is basically to ensure that we get in front of that demand and make sure that this sector that is gaining so much momentum, that we're moving at the speed of business too. that we can help them be successful and provide them with that. And there are other ways as well. There are things such as we do state business incentives. They are statutory, but they are often a good fit for companies in the manufacturing, and they have been in the manufacturing space, and they've been utilised by numerous companies in that lithium space as well. And it's also, we have some very established permitting processes. I won't say they're perfect, but they are very established, and that goes back to our history in mining. They are very predictable, and we are constantly working to improve those, and everything from maybe institutionalizing community input to looking at how we speed up those processes. Do we develop a separate process for DLE? So it's a constant conversation, and it is around removing barriers, speed to business, and making our market very attractive for these companies who we want to foster and be successful.
Okay, thanks. I know, John, we were talking about the change of administration, and I don't know if there's anything you want to talk about. I mean, you're now fully funded in construction, but you've all the Department of Energy, has had some DOGE cuts to it. The reconciliation bill is going through the Senate. There's been a lot of incentives under Biden. Biden's Build Back Better, whatever the IRA was meant to be an industrial policy to answer to China. We have a new administration that's trying to unwind that, and there seem to be some kind of biases toward certain forms of energy, and biases against other forms of energy. So if you could just comment on how this is evolving, in the U.S. As the geopolitics versus China angle, but obviously, but also just for AI and electric vehicles and the battery economy.
Yes, I mean, critical minerals in the U.S. actually got started, actually the Obama administration. I worked when we were at FMC looking at samples of spodumene from Afghanistan, in which they invited us to go take a visit. And I took a flyer on that when I spent my time in the Middle East in the Army already. I didn't want to go there again. The Trump administration, the first one came in, and there was a major focus. Obviously, we were permitted by the Trump administration a week before inauguration, and I was promptly sued because of that. That was the main reason. Biden administration came in and has put in a lot of these programs, which we all benefit from, around critical minerals, lithium, of course, rare earths, nickel, copper, and so forth. And with the Trump 2.0, critical minerals remains a main focus. So if you go to Interior's office, and I met with Secretary Burgum's chief of staff, they have their priorities are oil and gas, critical minerals, and nuclear. Those three, from a permitting standpoint, the energy department is very, very similar. The administration now is very tops down, so you have executive orders, and the executive orders are clear around critical minerals as being something that the administration very much wants. So I think that's positive. The other positive, I think, is around the regulatory process. Look, the BLM in Nevada is the best. The current director of the BLM, John Raby, who we know quite well, we all do, was the acting BLM director until the recent one here was finally confirmed by the Senate. So that kind of gives you an idea of where Nevada rates in terms of the mining policy in the state, mining law, but also the way the BLM operates here in Nevada, because they're used to gold projects, copper projects, and land use versus other BLM offices that are around like national parks and things like that. They don't have the skill set for it, and it doesn't transfer very much. So I think we're in a good situation today. Politics aside, you're right, the EV tax credits are gone. That's probably not going to, we're fighting over 45X, which looks like it's going to remain for critical minerals until 2033. A lot of folks are trying to push that out, but initially it was all cut off. So there is a acknowledgement in this administration that we need to help, because even nuclear's 45X, I think, might have had a sunset on it as well. But I think you need to look at the OEMs, where none of them complained about California fuel emission standards. I'm talking about the OEMs that are non-EV companies. So the General Motors, the Fords, the Stellantis, and so forth. Look, they have the ability to be able to make a lot of money on Silverados and Tahoes and F-150 pickup trucks and self-fund their business and not get into a price war like you're seeing in China right now, which is unsustainable for electric vehicles. And all of them are slowly and surely moving forward. The administration here today has got 3.5 years left. When you're looking to plan out model life for a car, typically its average is at least 7 years. That's why the folks are planning today, because this is coming. We can argue over adoption rates in the U.S. Europe is slowed down a little bit. But overall, you're growing globally at double-digit rates. Yes, you'll see hybrids for some things here. You're going to see more and more EVs like the Equinox that's come out that's doing very, very well, because all the car companies are looking at 2030 and beyond, because you got to plan that today. It takes a long time. And GM paid their LPO loan off in February, very quietly. And the LPO didn't know at first. The reason why they didn't want to renegotiate over scope, because they're retooling their factory in Spring Hill, which is 40 gigawatt hours, to go to LMR. And LG is already making LFP in Michigan right now. None of this is stopping. And it's data centers, it's portables, it's drones. I mean, look at all the wars that are been fought, whether it's Ukraine or the recent issues in the Middle East, with all the use of drones and so forth. The small ones aren't gas powered. There's no room for a gas tank. The strikes that the Ukraine made in deep into Russia were in trucks. There's not a gas motor in there. These are high strength batteries. So there's an acknowledgement in the administration that this is a big deal. And I think we're in a good place right now, although it's not going to have some of the pluses that you had in terms of EV tax credits, which I think the automotive companies are okay with, because, look, they're going to have a cost-competitive product anyways. So, and no one's given up, at least not from our perspective, at least from GM. And I think all these gentlemen here will tell you the same. I'm sure OEMs, trading companies, are still talking to them.
It's quite interesting. You're saying that GM paid back that $2.5 billion loan that they had for their battery plant with LG?
They did.
Interesting. James, it was on the tape yesterday that Ford is going to go ahead with their plant with CATL, even if the credits don't happen. So that's another data point related to that. On the campaign trail, Trump said he'd welcome CATL or BYD building a factory here. I speculated here last year and since then that part of a grand bargain with the negotiation with China could be welcoming not only BYD and CATL, but maybe Ganfeng. I mean, you had to demerge from Ganfeng, from your relationship.
I said that this morning, that if the world was a normal place, we'd probably be building everything together.
So do you think that, James, Ryan, do you think that could happen? Welcoming of Chinese investment, as long as it's in the United States across the battery supply chain?
Well, we better get busy if that isn't what we're going to do. I mean, the bottom line is that, you can talk about however you want to politically, but from a practical perspective, they're running us over. And, it's unfortunate that we have created some kind of, I don't even understand why, some kind of political context to the, supporting EVs. I mean, I can understand a policy that says, hey, let's go neutral on how we incentivize transportation, but I simply cannot figure how we would think that it's intelligent to be anti-EV, given that it is one of the most logical and capable ways to bring down dramatically emissions in the world, which we still need, despite what people are saying. So I, for one, think that we need to have a longer perspective. I don't think that the OEMs, as John, you just said, I think they have a long perspective because the nature of their business is a long perspective. They don't have it, they get run over by a truck, and that truck's going to be made by Chinese if we don't keep on the deal. Now, my personal view is that we should be a little bit more flexible. If for instance, if Ford wants to import CATL equipment to help them get to a state of the art, I think as long as it's not controlled by the Chinese, that should be a reasoned compromise. And I suspect that in the end, that's where we'll go. But I for one think that the electrification of transportation is independent of what the Trump administration wants to do. It can impact it in the short run, but it's not going to change the trajectory of the world and the need for lithium. And I should add, by the way, John, I don't know what you're thinking about this, but I also happen to own a company that's pretty significant in the solar business. And I can assure you one thing, that everybody that's in the solar industry right now isn't talking about little displays of battery storage. We're talking about major load shifting of daytime solar into the night. You talk about large quantities of lithium that are needed. There it is, too. So I think the combination of an inexorable push towards electrification. By the way, I've been driving electric cars for 5 years. I can't even imagine after driving one of these things that I'd ever want to go back to a putt-putt gasoline car that's, has a lag. My cars are so much better than the gas cars I've had before. I've had some nice gas cars too, by the way. That I don't understand why I think we need to get Trump to drive around in these electric cars. I mean, these things are fantastic, and they're better to drive. They're more economic to own in the long term. And by the way, if you take a look at what's happening in terms of addressing range anxiety, that's going away, and charging speeds, that's going away. Everyone's working on the problems, and it's not too far to the point where by the time Trump's out of office, electric cars are going to be vastly superior to this internal combustion engine, in my opinion.
One observation, Ryan, that I've made is that in China, it wasn't the incumbent ice makers that have led the EV revolution, but brand new companies or electronics companies like Xiaomi, right, that have now entered the market. Apple was famously, the Titan project invested I don't know how many billions to build an EV, but didn't do it. Like here, we're trying to force GM and Ford, right, to transition. But what do you think about Tesla? Obviously, you worked for Tesla and had a big experience there. Do you have any opinion on like why haven't we seen new entrants, beyond the Lucids and the Fiskars and the Rivians, from some of the mega tech players in the U.S.?
I mean, tech players in the U.S., they tend to be more on, say, the software side, consumer electronics side. It's a very different game to make software handheld devices versus heavy manufacturing. So we have seen a couple of the very large ones dabble in maybe doing contract manufacturing to make their own electric vehicles to try to get in the door a little bit. But I think it's not their main skill set, and it's a much shorter cycle time to make money off of software and consumer electronics than to get into the long cycles of the automotive sector. I think the handful of companies that have come up the past few years have found that out the hard way, as they actually build multi-billion-dollar facilities, as they build their own supply chains in the U.S. and throughout the world. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see some investments from the large tech players in the U.S., but for them to jump in themselves directly, I think is pretty outside of their main skill sets. And that's why companies like Tesla were founded not that long ago. Whoever knows the story of Tesla-made vehicles went to all of the battery manufacturers in the world and tried to put orders in and kind of got laughed out of the room. And they said that type of battery capacity doesn't exist in the world. If you want to place that order, every factory in the world could not supply it combined. And went around to all the different lithium-ion battery factories in the world and added up the entire global capacity back in 2013. And the global capacity then was 35 gigawatt hours per year. So the very simple math on the one-page business model was, fine, let's build one building that doubles global capacity. And that's why the early Tesla Reno Gigafactory capacity was 35 gigawatt hours per year to make one building that doubled capacity. And that's not the kind of thing you can do lightly, and I think that is more geared towards a new entrant as opposed to a legacy company taking that kind of risk.
Okay, great. Thanks for that answer. We have one question here that I'm looking at, and I'm going to ask it, but also have an additional wrinkle to it, because it says, how are Department of Defense funding opportunities under this administration being utilized to advance processing capacity within the U.S.? What I'd add to this is that there's been some talk about somehow the government can kind of backstop, price floors for specific projects or something. But one idea that I've been having lately is just like we have the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, like wouldn't it be smart for like the U.S. government to start buying lithium carbonate and spodumene right now and build a strategic lithium reserve, and that would kind of like lift the price. So if any of you could just kind of raise your hand to answer both those questions. What's the Department of Defense doing to help projects, and what do you think of this strategic lithium reserve idea?
I think they are moving towards that on the rare earth side. I think that's even more strategic for them in much, much lower quantities to build a stockpile. I think it may grow into critical minerals as a whole going forward, but it does look like they're starting off more on the rare earth side as we look at some of, especially the heavy rare earths and some of the antimony materials.
I don't see it. I don't, it may happen. You know, the Department of Defense, I've been dealing with them now for, my God, 17 years, and you know, they're an enormous organization with incredible capacity, but I haven't seen, like the DOE, them stepping in and really providing concrete and substantial support at the scales that are required for what we're doing. Now, look, that could change, and you know, the Defense Production Act is a very powerful instrument. If it was used, it could be used in a way that would be helpful, but I don't really think that's a logical place. I think Department of Energy was the first one that, in my opinion, stepped up at the Loan Program Office at the scales that caught all of our attention, and it could actually be large enough in scope to actually address the issues for large-scale lithium production in the United States. I think that's where we are right now, John. I don't know what you think about
So
it.
Title 17, one of the issues with Title 17, for one, is the long term to get it. It's difficult, but the grant amounts are fairly small. You're talking like $50 million or something like that.
Yeah.
That sounds like a lot of money, but even if you're in rare earths and you're going through, I don't know, 100 or more vessels to do solvent extraction to get one rare earth out, it's not going to be a lot of money.
Yeah.
So it's helpful, and you can stack it with other things, but of course there are strings that come with that. There are debt restrictions that come with that. And then you had mentioned earlier about China. If you look at a lot of even the tax grants now, they've really strengthened the foreign entity of concern in terms of who owns the technology, is there a board seat, and so forth. So it's a complicated puzzle. The good thing about DoD, though, is they consider North America all domestic, so not in a Canada 51st state kind of way, but DoD grants can be used in Canada as well, which, you know, of course, is very mineral rich too. So, but the amounts are not big enough. I think stockpiling, Ryan is a good point, because when you get into things like, I don't know, terbium or dysprosium or whatever else, I mean, like 2 sea containers can like upset the world market here, and that's the problem, because batteries for neodymium or praseodymium or so forth, lanthanum, they're more they're used in higher quantities, but these little salt and pepper that you need to use, I mean, I've gotten people asking, why don't we just build this stuff? Because there's no market for it. I mean, if the F-35 program is cut, you could lose half your demand. Or if we're not going to build destroyers or submarines, the DoD is not big enough to support someone spending $2 or $3 billion to develop a project on its own.
I agree.
Okay, we're at time, so thank you very much to all the panelists for a great conversation about Nevada and lithium and recycling and politics.